there is a quiet kind of history that rarely appears in grand paintings or famous speeches. It is not the history of presidents, generals, or great battles. It is the history of ordinary mornings. The history of simple kitchens. The history of wooden tables worn smooth by years of use. The history of small meals eaten beside warm fires while rain tapped softly against windows. Tonight, we drift gently into that quieter history. We step back into 19th century America, into a world where food was not only something people enjoyed. It was something they thought about almost every day. It shaped their work, their routines, their worries, and their comfort. Long before supermarkets, long before electric refrigerators, long before food arrived from every corner of the world, Americans lived much closer to the meals they ate. Many people grew their food. Many prepared it from scratch. Many spent hours every week preserving it so that it would last through long winters. Food was not hidden behind packaging. It was visible everywhere. In gardens. In smokehouses. In root cellars. In orchards. In barns. In fields stretching toward distant horizons. And so, as evening settles softly around us, we begin our slow walk into the daily meals of the 1800s. Imagine the first light of morning spreading across a small farm somewhere in the young United States. The sun has not fully risen. The air feels cool. Mist rests quietly above fields. A rooster calls in the distance. The house itself is simple. Perhaps it is made of logs. Perhaps of wood planks. Perhaps of stone in older communities along the East Coast. Inside, the family is already stirring. People in the 19th century often woke early. Much earlier than many people today. The day was guided by sunlight. When dawn arrived, work usually followed. The kitchen begins to come alive. A fire that has slept through the night must be encouraged back to life. Someone adds wood. Someone blows gently on glowing coals. Soon the room fills with warmth. The smell of smoke drifts through the house. Breakfast is beginning. For many Americans during the early and middle years of the 19th century, breakfast was often the largest meal of the day. A long day of physical labor waited ahead. Farm work required energy. Chopping wood required energy. Laundry required energy. Travel required energy. Nearly every task demanded strength. Food was fuel, but it was also comfort. One of the most common breakfast foods was porridge. Simple. Warm. Filling. Made from cornmeal, oats, or other grains. A pot simmered slowly above the fire. The porridge thickened as it cooked. Sometimes milk was added. Sometimes a little butter. Sometimes molasses. Sometimes nothing at all. The meal depended on what the household had available. Corn was especially important. In many regions, corn appeared on tables almost every day. Cornmeal mush. Cornbread. Jonna cakes. Hoe cakes. Corn was reliable. Corn grew well in many places. Corn fed families through difficult seasons. As bowls of porridge were served, another familiar smell might fill the room. Fresh bread. Bread occupied an important place in 19th century life. Many women baked regularly, sometimes several times each week. The process required skill. Flour was mixed. Dough was kneaded. The dough rested. Then it baked in ovens or near hearth fires. The result was bread that tasted different from modern factory-made loaves. Every household developed its own methods. Every baker developed her own touch. A loaf might be dense or light. Dark or pale. Sweet or plain. The bread carried the personality of the kitchen where it was made. Alongside bread, families might eat butter. Fresh butter was common in rural households. Making butter required patience. Cream was collected. Then it was churned. The process could take considerable time. Children often helped. The steady rhythm of the churn became part of daily life. Back and forth. Up and down. Slow and steady. Eventually the butter appeared. Soft. Rich. Golden. A small reward for careful work. Milk itself appeared frequently at breakfast tables, especially on farms where cows were kept. Fresh milk had a different relationship with daily life then. It could not be stored easily for long periods. Without refrigeration, timing mattered. Food moved according to natural rhythms. People consumed many foods soon after they were produced. Eggs were another common breakfast food. Chickens wandered yards and farmyards across America. Their eggs offered dependable nourishment. Some mornings eggs were fried. Some mornings boiled. Some mornings scrambled in iron skillets that had served families for years. The sound of sizzling fat might fill the kitchen. The smell drifted through the room. Outside, sunlight slowly spread across fields. The day was underway. In some homes, especially wealthier ones, breakfast might include ham or bacon. Salted pork occupied a special place in 19th century diets. Pigs were practical animals. They could be raised in many regions. Much of the animal could be used. Nothing was wasted if it could be avoided. After slaughter, pork was preserved through salting or smoking. The preservation process allowed meat to last for months. In a world without refrigeration, this mattered enormously. A smokehouse was more than a small building. It was security. It was preparation. It was insurance against hunger. Slices of smoked pork hanging inside represented future meals. Future comfort. Future survival. As breakfast comes to an end, family members prepare for their day. Dishes are cleared. Tools are gathered. Doors open. People step outside. Now we move with them into the larger landscape of 19th century America. The nation was vast. Its regions differed greatly. Food in New England looked different from food in the Deep South. Food on the frontier differed from food in growing cities. Immigrants brought traditions from Europe and elsewhere. Native peoples maintained foodways developed over centuries. African influences shaped many American dishes. Together these traditions blended into a rich and varied food culture. Yet despite regional differences, certain realities connected many Americans. Seasonality shaped life. Food availability changed throughout the year. People ate what the land offered. Spring brought one set of meals. Summer another. Autumn another. Winter another still. The seasons guided the menu. In spring, families welcomed fresh foods after long winters. Gardens awakened. Green shoots appeared. Tender vegetables emerged from warming soil. After months of preserved foods, these fresh ingredients felt especially valuable. Young onions. Early greens. Fresh herbs. Peas. Each arrival marked a small celebration. Not a loud celebration. A quiet one. A reminder that winter had passed. Summer expanded these possibilities. Gardens overflowed. Fields flourished. Markets became colorful. Baskets filled with vegetables. Fresh fruits ripened beneath warm sunlight. Strawberries appeared. Then cherries. Then peaches in suitable regions. then apples later in the season. A walk through a summer market could reveal an astonishing variety of produce. Yet abundance also created work. Food preservation became essential. Families knew that winter would return. The harvest could not simply be enjoyed. It had to be saved. So kitchens became busy places. Women preserved fruits. Vegetables were stored. Pickles were made. Jams simmered. Jellies cooled. Herbs dried. The quiet labor of preparation filled long days. Many households maintained root cellars. These underground storage spaces helped protect food from extreme temperatures. Inside rested potatoes, carrots, turnips, apples, other hardy foods. Throughout winter these stores provided nourishment. A root cellar was not glamorous. Yet it represented wisdom gathered through generations. The knowledge of how to carry summer into winter. As autumn approached, harvest season arrived. This was one of the busiest periods of the year. Fields demanded attention. Crops needed gathering. Families worked together. Neighbors often helped one another. The success of the harvest affected the months ahead. Cornfields rustled beneath cool breezes. Pumpkins rested among fading vines. Apple orchards filled with fruit. Wagons moved slowly along dusty roads. The air carried scents of earth and leaves. Food and season became inseparable. Then winter returned. Snow-covered fields in northern regions. Cold winds swept across plains. Gardens slept beneath frozen ground. Meals became simpler. Preserved foods played larger roles. Salt pork, dried beans, stored vegetables, pickled foods, bread. These sustained households through long months. And yet winter meals possessed their own comfort. A steaming stew on a cold evening. Fresh bread beside a fire. Warm cider in a simple mug. Such foods offered reassurance against darkness and cold. As the years passed through the 19th century, most Americans remained connected to agriculture in some way. Even people living in towns often maintained gardens. Food production happened close to home. Distance between producer and consumer was often very small. Many people knew exactly where their food originated. They planted it, raised it, harvested it, prepared it. The chain from field to table was visible, understandable, personal. Now let us slow our pace even further and spend time inside one of these kitchens. The heart of the home. The center of daily life. The room where much of the family's energy gathered. A 19th century kitchen was a place of constant activity. Fires required maintenance. Water required carrying. Food required preparation. Nothing happened instantly. Every meal represented labor. Wood had to be chopped. Water drawn from wells. Ingredients prepared by hand. Cooking itself demanded attention. A cook could not simply set a timer and walk away. She watched. Adjusted. Stirred. Listened. Experience guided her. The sound of boiling. The smell of baking. The appearance of dough. These signs communicated information. Skill grew from observation. Many recipes existed only in memory. Measurements were often approximate. A handful. A pinch. Enough flour to make the dough feel right. Knowledge passed from generation to generation. Through practice. Through repetition. Through daily life. The kitchen also contained important tools. Iron pots. Wooden spoons. Knives. Mixing bowls. Skillets blackened by years of use. These objects became familiar companions. Each carried marks of work performed over countless meals. Some tools lasted decades, perhaps even generations. A skillet used by a grandmother might later serve her daughter, then her granddaughter. The object remained. Lives passed around it. Meals connected them. In cities, life looked somewhat different. Urban residents often purchased more of their food. Markets played larger roles. Street vendors appeared. Bakeries served customers. But even there, many foods remained simple by modern standards. Freshness mattered because preservation remained limited. Daily shopping was common. Food moved quickly from seller to buyer. Morning markets bustled with activity. Farmers arrived with wagons. Produce filled stalls. Fish rested on beds of ice where available. Customers examined goods carefully. Conversations flowed quietly through crowded spaces. The market offered more than food. It offered connection, news, community, routine, regular encounters between neighbors, a familiar rhythm within city life. By midday, many Americans paused for dinner. The word dinner often referred to the main meal eaten earlier in the day than it commonly is now. For laborers and farmers especially, this meal provided substantial nourishment. Stews were common. Soups were common. Bread appeared frequently. Potatoes appeared frequently. Beans appeared frequently. These foods stretched resources while providing satisfaction. A large pot simmering above a fire represented efficiency. Ingredients could cook together slowly. Flavors blended. Tough cuts of meat softened. Vegetables absorbed rich broth. The meal became greater than the sum of its parts. And so, as the afternoon sun climbs gently higher above fields and towns, we settle beside that simmering pot, listening quietly to the soft bubbling sounds, while the story of everyday American food continues to unfold. The soft bubbling of the stew continues. A thin ribbon of steam rises from the pot and drifts upward through the warm kitchen air. Outside, the day moves forward at its usual pace. Sunlight falls across fences. Chickens scratch at the ground. A wagon rolls slowly along a nearby road. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once and then grows quiet again. Inside the house, the midday meal is nearly ready. For many American families of the 19th century, stews and soups were practical foods. They made good use of whatever ingredients happened to be available. A cook could add vegetables from the garden, herbs from a nearby patch of soil, and perhaps a small amount of meat if the household could spare it. Nothing needed to be wasted. In fact, avoiding waste was one of the most important habits of everyday life. Food required too much work to be thrown away carelessly. A stale loaf of bread might become part of another meal. Leftover vegetables might find their way into soup. Bits of meat could flavor a pot of beans. People learned to see value in almost everything. This attitude shaped kitchens across the country. The meal is served. Wooden bowls are placed on the table. The family gathers. Conversation is often simple. Work still waits outside. There is little reason to rush, but there is also little opportunity to linger for long. The food is filling. Warm. Dependable. The kind of meal that gives strength for the rest of the day. Beans appear often on these tables. It would be difficult to understand 19th century American food without understanding beans. They were inexpensive. They stored well. They could feed many people. Different varieties grew across different regions. Some households preferred one kind. Others preferred another. But nearly everywhere, beans offered a steady source of nourishment. A pot of beans might cook slowly for hours. The scent gradually filled the house. Perhaps onions were added. Perhaps pork. Perhaps only a few seasonings. The exact recipe mattered less than the comfort it provided. Potatoes shared a similar importance. By the 1800s, potatoes had become deeply woven into everyday meals. They could be baked, boiled, mashed, fried, added to soups, added to stews, stored for long periods. A basket of potatoes in a cellar represented security. Families knew that even when fresh produce became scarce, potatoes could still help carry them through difficult months. As afternoon settles over the countryside, let us step beyond the kitchen and visit the fields where much of this food begins. The landscape of 19th century America was filled with farms of many sizes. Some were small family operations. Others covered large areas of land. Fields of corn stretched toward the horizon. Wheat rippled beneath the wind. Rows of vegetables followed neat lines through rich soil. The work was demanding. Every season brought its own responsibilities. In spring, seeds were planted. In summer, crops were tended. In autumn, harvests were gathered. In winter, tools were repaired and plans were made for the coming year. Food was never far from anyone's thoughts. Even when people were not eating, they were often preparing for future meals. A farmer looking across a field of corn was also looking toward winter dinners. Toward bread. Toward porridge. Toward livestock feed. Toward survival. Corn remained one of the great foundations of American diets. Its importance stretched back centuries before the 19th century. Native peoples had cultivated corn long before European settlers arrived. Over time, corn became essential to communities across the continent. Its uses seemed almost endless. Cornmeal could become bread. It could become mush. It could become cakes cooked on hot surfaces near open fires. It could feed animals. It could be stored for future use. A successful corn harvest brought reassurance. An unsuccessful one brought worry. The relationship between food and weather was especially strong during this period. Today, people often think of weather as something to discuss. In the 19th century, weather could influence entire food supplies. A drought might reduce harvests. An early frost could damage crops. Heavy rains might create difficulties during planting or harvesting. People watched the sky carefully. Clouds carried meaning. Rain carried meaning. Sunshine carried meaning. The success of future meals often depended on forces beyond human control. This uncertainty encouraged careful planning. Many households stored as much food as possible. Shelves filled with jars. Cellars filled with vegetables. Smokehouses filled with preserved meat. Preparation became a form of protection. As the afternoon continues, we slowly leave the farm and travel toward a small American town. The roads are dusty. Horses pull wagons loaded with goods. Buildings stand close together near the center of town. Signs hang above shop doors. People move through the streets carrying baskets and parcels. Food here follows somewhat different patterns than it does on isolated farms. Town residents may purchase more of their meals. Bakeries become important. A bakery often fills the surrounding streets with pleasant smells. Fresh bread cools on racks. Pies wait in windows. Customers enter throughout the day. Bread remains one of the most common foods in America. Nearly every household consumes it. Yet bread itself varies greatly. Some loaves are made from wheat flour. Others contain rye. Others combine several grains. Texture varies. Flavor varies. Appearance varies. Each region develops preferences influenced by local crops and traditions. Immigrant communities contribute additional variety. The 19th century was a time of significant immigration. People arrived from many parts of the world, bringing recipes, ingredients, and cooking techniques with them. Food became a quiet record of these journeys. A loaf of bread might reflect traditions carried across an ocean. A soup might contain memories of distant homelands. A family recipe might survive generations of change. The table became a place where old worlds and new worlds met. In some towns, markets operate several days each week. Farmers arrive before sunrise. Vendors arrange their goods carefully. Customers inspect produce. Children accompany parents through crowded aisles. The atmosphere feels busy but not frantic. Voices blend together. Wheels creak. Animals make occasional sounds. The market breathes with the rhythm of everyday life. Fresh vegetables attract attention. Cabbages. Carrots. Turnips. Beets. Onions. Many of these vegetables store well, making them valuable throughout the year. Others appear only during certain seasons. People learn to appreciate foods when they are available because availability is never guaranteed. This awareness creates a strong connection to the calendar. Food becomes a way of experiencing time itself. Strawberries signal one part of the year. Apples signal another. Pumpkins signal another. Each season arrives with its own tastes, its own scents, its own expectations. As the day slowly moves toward evening, let us consider one of the most important preserved foods of 19th century America. Salt pork. For countless families, salt pork was a staple. Large pieces of pork were packed with salt to prevent spoilage. The process was simple but effective. Months later, the meat could still be used. Before cooking, some of the salt might be removed through soaking. Then the meat could be added to beans, stews, vegetables, or other dishes. Often only a small amount was needed. Its flavor spread throughout an entire pot. A little meat could help feed many people. Salt itself played a remarkably important role in food preservation. Without modern refrigeration, preserving food required creativity and effort. Salting was one solution. Smoking was another. Drying was another. Pickling was another. Each method extended the life of food. Each method increased the chances that a family would have enough to eat during difficult periods. Imagine entering a smokehouse. The air smells rich and smoky. Wooden beams support hanging cuts of meat. The room is cool and dim. Months of careful preparation are visible all around. This building represents patience. The meat hanging here was prepared not for today but for the future. Food preservation always involved thinking ahead. Winter might seem distant in summer. Yet wise households prepared long before cold weather arrived. The same principle applied to fruit. Fresh fruit was wonderful, but fruit seasons often passed quickly. Preserving fruit allowed households to enjoy it much later. Apples were especially important. Apple trees grew across many regions of America. An orchard could provide food for years. Fresh apples were eaten by themselves. They were baked into pies, cooked into sauces, dried for storage, pressed into cider. The apple became one of the most familiar sights in American food culture. Autumn orchards carried a quiet beauty. Branches heavy with fruit. Leaves beginning to change color. Cool air moving gently through the trees. Baskets filling one apple at a time. The work could be repetitive, but it connected people directly to the harvest. Back in the kitchen, apples might become pie. Pie occupied a beloved place in American cooking. Fruit pies appeared frequently when ingredients allowed. Apple pie, cherry pie, peach pie, berry pie. The specific filling depended on region and season. Pie crusts required skill. Experienced bakers learned how dough should feel beneath their hands. Practice created confidence. Confidence created consistency. The result was a dessert that brought simple pleasure to ordinary days. Not every family enjoyed pie regularly. Economic circumstances varied greatly. Some households faced frequent hardships. Food insecurity existed throughout the 19th century. Crop failures occurred. Jobs disappeared. Illness interrupted work. Many families lived close to the edge of necessity. Their meals could be plain, limited, repetitive. Yet even modest meals carried meaning. A bowl of soup shared among family members. A loaf of bread divided at the table. A warm drink on a cold evening. These small comforts mattered deeply. As shadows begin to lengthen outside, we turn our attention toward beverages. Water, of course, remained essential. But many other drinks appeared regularly in 19th century life. Milk was common where cows were available. Cider was popular in many regions. Tea appeared frequently. Coffee gradually became increasingly common throughout the century. The preparation of these drinks often became part of daily routine. Coffee, in particular, developed a strong presence in many households. The smell of coffee brewing could fill a room with warmth and familiarity. A simple cup offered comfort during early mornings and long days. Tea carried its own traditions. A teapot resting near the fire. Steam rising gently. Cups arranged carefully. Quiet moments shared between family members or visitors. These scenes repeated themselves thousands of times across towns and farms throughout the nation. As evening approaches, kitchens begin preparing the final meal of the day. The pace slows slightly. Work outdoors begins to wind down. Animals are fed. Tools are returned to storage. Doors close. The household gathers again. Supper is often lighter than the midday meal. Bread may appear once more. Perhaps leftovers from earlier. Perhaps fresh milk. Perhaps vegetables. Perhaps a small amount of meat. The exact menu changes from house to house, season to season, year to year. Yet the purpose remains constant. To nourish. To comfort. To mark the transition from labor to rest. The fire glows softly. Light flickers across walls. Voices become quieter. Outside, darkness gradually settles across fields and roads. The long day is ending. But before sleep arrives, countless families still perform one final act connected to food. Preparation for tomorrow. Dough may be mixed. Beans may be soaked. Ingredients may be gathered. Plans may be made. The cycle never truly stops. One meal leads naturally into the next. One season leads naturally into another. One generation passes its knowledge to the next. And in these simple routines, repeated day after day across the 19th century, we begin to see that American food history is not merely a story of recipes. It is a story of patience, of work, of weather, of family, of ordinary people finding nourishment in the world around them. As the last light fades beyond the horizon and the kitchen settles into a gentle evening quiet, our slow journey through everyday meals continues onward into another day. The evening quiet settles gently over the house. The fire has burned lower now. Its bright flames have softened into a bed of glowing coals. Shadows move slowly across the walls. The sounds of the day have nearly disappeared. Outside, the fields rest beneath the night sky. The animals are quiet. The roads are empty. The wind moves softly through trees and over open land. Inside, the family prepares for sleep. Yet even in these peaceful hours, food remains part of everyday life. A loaf of bread may be resting beneath a cloth, waiting for tomorrow morning. A pot sits near the hearth. A sack of flour leans against a wall. Bundles of dried herbs hang from wooden beams overhead. The kitchen never completely forgets its purpose. Morning will come again. Another meal will be needed. Another day of work will begin. And so, before we move into a new day, let us spend a little more time exploring the foods that quietly filled American tables throughout the 19th century. Among the most important foods were grains. Grains formed the foundation of countless meals. Wheat, corn, oats, rye. These simple crops provided energy and nourishment for millions of people. A field of grain could seem almost magical in the right light. Golden stalks stretching beneath the sun. A gentle breeze creating slow waves across the landscape. Yet behind that beauty stood months of labor. Planting, weeding, harvesting, threshing, grinding. Every loaf of bread represented an enormous amount of work. Many rural families brought grain to local mills. The mill occupied an important place in community life. Farmers arrived with wagons carrying sacks of grain. Large wooden wheels turned steadily. Machinery hummed and groaned. The grain entered one form and emerged as flour or meal. The transformation felt almost remarkable. The mill connected farms to kitchens, fields to tables, labor to nourishment. Nearby streams often powered these mills. Water moved endlessly over rocks and around bends. The same streams that watered fields also helped prepare the food people would eat. Nature and daily life remained closely connected. After the grain became flour, another stage began. Baking. The smell of baking bread was among the most familiar scents of 19th century America. It drifted through farmhouses, townhomes, cabins, small settlements on the frontier. Fresh bread signaled comfort. It signaled preparation. It signaled home. A loaf cooling on a table represented more than food. It represented care. Someone had spent time creating it. Someone had planned ahead. Someone had transformed simple ingredients into something nourishing. Children often remembered these smells long after they grew older. Many memories of 19th century life included kitchens filled with warmth and baking bread. The simple pleasures of daily life often left the deepest impressions. As dawn approaches once again in our story, the house begins to awaken. The sky outside slowly brightens. Birds begin their morning songs. The first person rises from bed. A new fire must be built up from the remaining coals. This task becomes part of the daily rhythm. The fire provides warmth. The fire provides light. Most importantly, the fire allows food to be prepared. The kitchen comes alive once more. Breakfast begins. Perhaps today the family enjoys cornmeal mush. The meal is simple. Cornmeal is mixed with water and cooked until thick. The finished dish may be served with milk. Perhaps with molasses if available. Perhaps with butter. perhaps completely plain. For many families, simplicity is normal. Meals do not need elaborate ingredients to satisfy hunger. Consistency matters more. Reliability matters more. The same foods appear again and again because they work. They nourish. They store well. They fit the realities of everyday life. Molasses deserves special attention. Throughout much of the 19th century, molasses was a common sweetener. Its dark color and rich flavor appeared in many kitchens. People added it to breads, to cakes, to baked beans, to porridge, to countless other foods. A small amount could transform a meal. Sugar was available, but it was not always as inexpensive or accessible as it would become later. Molasses often filled an important role. A spoonful added warmth and sweetness to otherwise simple dishes. As breakfast ends, the family returns to work. Let us travel now toward another important part of American food culture. The garden. Many households maintained gardens of some kind. Even relatively small gardens could produce impressive amounts of food. Rows of vegetables stretched through carefully prepared soil. Beans climbed supports. Cabbages formed tight heads. Carrots pushed beneath the earth. Squash spread outward across the ground. Every plant had a purpose. Every harvest contributed to future meals. Gardens provided more than food. They provided independence. A successful garden reduced the need to purchase supplies. It increased household security. Families learned which crops performed best in their local conditions. Knowledge accumulated year after year. Parents taught children. Neighbors exchanged advice. Communities shared seeds and experience. A garden reflected patience. Seeds planted in spring required faith. Weeks passed before results appeared. Careful attention followed. Watering. Weeding. Protecting plants from insects and animals. The reward came later. Summer and autumn transformed effort into abundance. Vegetables harvested fresh from the garden possessed special value. Their journey from soil to table could take only a few hours. Fresh beans might be gathered in the morning and served by evening. Lettuce could move directly from garden rows to the dinner table. This closeness created a strong awareness of seasonal change. People knew exactly when foods appeared because they watched them grow. The arrival of the first ripe tomato. The first peas. The first sweet corn. These moments felt meaningful. Not dramatic. Not celebrated with great fanfare. Simply appreciated. Quiet gifts from the passing seasons. Sweet corn itself became a favorite food in many regions. Fresh ears could be boiled and eaten with butter. Families gathered around tables during summer evenings, enjoying corn harvested only hours earlier. The sweetness felt remarkable. Especially after months of preserved foods. Seasonal abundance carried its own kind of joy. Not loud joy. Gentle joy. The satisfaction of seeing hard work rewarded. Nearby orchards contributed another layer to the American diet. Fruit trees required patience as well. Years could pass before a young tree produced significant harvests. Yet once established, an orchard became an enduring source of food. Apple trees dominated many landscapes. But pears, peaches, cherries, and other fruits also appeared depending on climate and region. An orchard changed throughout the year. Spring brought blossoms. Summer brought growth. Autumn brought harvest. Winter brought rest. Each stage possessed its own beauty. Blossoms drifting through spring air. Branches heavy with fruit in autumn sunlight. Snow resting quietly among bare limbs during winter. The orchard connected people to time itself. A reminder that growth could not be rushed. Fruit often appeared at meals in various forms. Fresh fruit during harvest season. Dried fruit during winter. Preserves throughout the year. Apple butter became especially popular in many areas. Prepared through long hours of cooking, it transformed apples into a thick, flavorful spread. The process required patience. Large kettles simmered slowly. The mixture thickened gradually. Families stirred and watched. Time did much of the work. The final result could be stored and enjoyed long after harvest ended. Now let us continue our walk through the countryside and visit a dairy farm. The morning sun shines across grassy fields. Cows graze quietly. The pace feels calm, unhurried. The production of dairy foods required daily attention. Cows needed care regardless of weather. Rain, snow, heat, cold. The routine continued. Milking usually occurred twice each day, morning and evening. The work demanded consistency. Fresh milk moved quickly into household use. Some became butter. Some became cheese. Some was consumed directly. Cheese held particular value because it could be stored longer than fresh milk. Many families relied on cheese as an important source of nourishment. A wheel of cheese resting in a cool storage area represented future meals. Another example of planning ahead. Another example of transforming a temporary resource into something lasting. Butter production occupied countless hours across the 19th century. The process of churning demanded effort. Cream was collected carefully, then churned until butter formed. The task could feel repetitive. Yet repetition shaped much of 19th century life. Many essential activities involved steady work performed day after day. The rhythm itself became familiar, comforting even. The sound of a butter churn moving steadily in a farmhouse kitchen was part of the soundtrack of everyday America. Children often participated in these tasks. Food preparation involved entire families. Young people learned skills early. They learned how gardens worked, how livestock were cared for, how food was preserved, how bread was baked. Practical knowledge passed naturally between generations. These lessons rarely occurred in formal settings. They happened through observation, through participation, through everyday experience. A child helping gather eggs was learning about food. A child carrying vegetables from a garden was learning about food. A child watching bread rise near a warm hearth was learning about food. The kitchen served as a classroom as much as a place for cooking. As afternoon sunlight brightens the countryside, another important food comes into view. Rice. Though not as widespread as corn or wheat across the entire nation, rice played a significant role in certain regions, particularly parts of the South. Rice cultivation required specific conditions and considerable labor. Where it thrived, it became a staple ingredient. Rice could accompany meats, vegetables, stews. It absorbed flavors beautifully. Like many staple foods, its strength lay in versatility. The most successful foods of the 19th century were often adaptable. They could fit many situations, many budgets, many seasons. The same principle applied to beans, potatoes, cornmeal, and bread. These foods remained popular because they solved practical problems. They fed people reliably. And reliability was one of the most valuable qualities a food could possess. The day continues. The sun moves slowly westward. Fields glow beneath afternoon light. The steady rhythm of work and meals carries on. Across farms, villages, and growing towns, countless Americans prepare food much as their neighbors do. Different ingredients, different recipes, different traditions, yet connected by common needs: hunger, comfort, family, preparation. And as the afternoon drifts quietly toward evening once more, we continue our slow journey through the foods that sustained ordinary lives throughout the 19th century, moving ever deeper into the kitchens, gardens, orchards, and fields where America's daily meals were created. The afternoon sunlight grows softer. Long shadows stretch across fields and dirt roads. The air begins to cool. Birds move through the trees in quieter numbers now, and the steady work of the day gradually slows. Across the American countryside of the 19th century, this was often the hour when people could finally pause for a moment and look around them. The hardest work was not always finished, but evening was approaching. And evening always brought thoughts of food. A warm meal waited ahead. A gathering around the table. A chance to rest tired hands. A chance to sit near the fire. As we continue our slow journey through everyday American meals, let us spend some time with one of the most important foods of all: beans. Few foods appeared more often on 19th century tables. Beans were humble. They were not luxurious. They were not rare. Yet they quietly helped feed millions of people. Dried beans could be stored for long periods. They traveled well. They remained useful through every season. A sack of beans sitting in a pantry represented security. When fresh vegetables became scarce, beans remained. When money became tight, beans remained. When winter storms arrived, beans remained. Many families cooked large pots of beans that lasted for several meals. The beans softened slowly as they cooked. Hours passed. The kitchen filled with gentle aromas. Perhaps onions were added. Perhaps salt pork. Perhaps herbs from the garden. Simple ingredients combined to create something nourishing and comforting. In New England, baked beans became especially famous. A heavy pot sat near the heat for many hours. The slow cooking transformed the ingredients. The meal required patience rather than constant attention. By evening, the beans were rich and satisfying. A piece of bread alongside them completed the meal. The simplicity felt complete. Nothing extravagant. Nothing unnecessary. Only food prepared carefully and shared among family. The same could be said of many 19th century meals. Practicality guided much of American cooking. Ingredients needed to stretch. Resources needed to last. People learned how to create satisfying meals from what was available. This skill became especially important on the frontier. Let us travel westward now. The 19th century was a century of movement. People crossed mountains. They traveled rivers. They followed trails into new territories. As settlements expanded westward, food remained a constant concern. A family moving into frontier lands could not depend on nearby stores. They often needed to provide much of their own food. The journey itself required planning. Flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salted meat, coffee. These supplies might travel hundreds of miles in wagons. Every pound mattered. Every item needed a purpose. Along dusty trails, meals were often simple. A fire was built. A pot was placed over the flames. Basic ingredients became supper. The food may not have been elaborate, but after a long day of travel, warmth and nourishment mattered more than variety. When new farms were established, gardens often appeared quickly. Families understood their importance. A garden could provide vegetables throughout much of the year. Seeds became valuable possessions. Knowledge became valuable possessions. The ability to grow food often meant the difference between comfort and hardship. As settlements matured, food traditions slowly developed. Communities exchanged recipes. Neighbors shared seeds. Harvests were celebrated quietly through shared meals. The table helped transform unfamiliar land into home. Meanwhile, back in older communities of the East, food culture continued to evolve. Cities were growing larger. Markets became busier. Transportation improved. Some foods could travel farther than before. Canals, rivers, railroads, and ships gradually connected producers and consumers in new ways. Yet even as these changes occurred, many Americans still lived close to the sources of their food. The connection remained visible. A person could see the fields where wheat grew, the orchards where apples ripened, the pastures where cows grazed. Food felt tangible, immediate, part of daily life. Now let us visit one of the most beloved foods in 19th century America. The apple. The apple was everywhere. In orchards, in markets, in kitchens, in cellars. Few fruits matched its usefulness. Fresh apples were enjoyed during harvest season. Some were sweet, some tart, some crisp, others softer and better suited for cooking. Every variety possessed its own character. Families often knew exactly which apples were best for pies, which were best for cider, and which were best for storage. Autumn apple harvests brought busy days. Ladders leaned against trees. Baskets filled steadily. Children gathered fallen fruit. Wagons carried harvests home. The work required time, but it also carried a certain peaceful rhythm. The orchard glowed beneath cool sunlight. Leaves drifted through the air. The scent of apples mixed with the scent of earth and wood smoke. Inside the kitchen, apples transformed into many different foods. Apple pies, apple sauces, apple butter, dried apples. Each preparation extended the usefulness of the harvest. Drying apples became a common preservation method. Slices were prepared carefully and allowed to dry over time. Months later, they could still provide flavor and nourishment. In winter, dried apples brought reminders of autumn. A taste of warmer days. A memory carried forward through careful preparation. This connection between seasons appeared throughout 19th century food culture. Summer was never entirely gone if peaches had been preserved. Autumn remained present if apples filled the cellar. Gardens continued to provide through pickled vegetables. The past season lingered quietly in jars, barrels, and storage rooms. Preservation became a way of carrying time forward. Now evening approaches. The sky begins to shift toward gold. Farmers return from fields. Workers return from workshops. Children finish chores. The house becomes active again. Supper preparations begin. The final meal of the day often reflected whatever ingredients remained available. Perhaps soup. Perhaps bread and cheese. Perhaps potatoes and vegetables. Perhaps leftovers from earlier meals. Nothing was wasted. Leftovers were not viewed as undesirable. They were practical, valuable, evidence that food had been used wisely. A pot of soup could easily welcome yesterday's vegetables. Bread a day old could still serve many purposes. Resourcefulness shaped every kitchen. This resourcefulness extended to meat as well. Fresh meat was not necessarily available every day. When animals were slaughtered, families often worked quickly to preserve what could not be eaten immediately. Nothing valuable was discarded without reason. Every useful part contributed in some way. This approach reflected necessity. Food represented labor. Animals required care. Crops required effort. Waste meant losing the benefits of that work. As darkness gradually settles outside, another familiar scene appears across countless American homes. The evening hearth. Families gather near the fire. The room grows warmer. Light flickers softly across faces. Perhaps someone mends clothing. Perhaps someone reads aloud. Perhaps conversation drifts quietly through the room. Food and fire remain closely connected. A kettle may hang nearby. Bread may rest on the table. The smells of supper linger in the air. There is comfort here. Not luxury. Not abundance beyond measure. Simply comfort. The comfort of having enough. The comfort of warmth after labor. The comfort of familiar meals shared among familiar people. As the 19th century continued, immigration brought new influences into American kitchens. German immigrants introduced traditions that became woven into local food cultures. Irish immigrants carried recipes shaped by generations of experience. Italian immigrants later contributed their own flavors and techniques. Many other groups did the same. Food quietly recorded these journeys. A recipe passed from parent to child could survive oceans, wars, hardships, and new beginnings. The ingredients might change. The surroundings might change. Yet the memory remained. The table became a place where old traditions met new opportunities. Over time, regional foods became even more distinct. In New England, seafood appeared frequently along coastal areas. In the South, corn-based dishes remained deeply important. In farming regions of the Midwest, hearty meals reflected agricultural abundance. Along rivers, fish entered local diets. Near forests, wild game sometimes supplemented household food supplies. The American diet was never exactly the same everywhere. The country was simply too large, too varied, too diverse. Yet beneath these differences, familiar patterns remained. Bread, beans, potatoes, corn, preserved foods, seasonal produce, simple preparations. These formed the backbone of daily eating for countless families. And so the story of food in the 19th century is not really a story about special occasions. It is a story about ordinary days. The thousands upon thousands of meals that rarely appeared in history books. The breakfasts eaten before sunrise. The dinners shared during busy afternoons. The suppers enjoyed beside evening fires. These meals sustained lives. They supported communities. They connected generations. Outside, night has fully arrived now. The stars appear above quiet fields. The roads have emptied. Windows glow softly in the darkness. Inside each home, preparations for tomorrow are already beginning. A loaf may be rising. Beans may be soaking. A garden harvest may wait on the kitchen table. The cycle continues. Steady. Reliable. Unhurried. Just as it has for generations. And as another peaceful evening settles over 19th century America, we continue our gentle journey into the foods, routines, and quiet comforts that filled everyday life. Another morning arrives softly over the American countryside. The darkness fades little by little. A pale glow appears along the horizon. Dew gathers on grass. The air feels cool and fresh before the heat of the day begins to build. In farmhouses, cabins, and townhomes across the nation, people begin waking once again. A new day always means new work. And new work always means food. The relationship between labor and eating was deeply woven into 19th century life. Most Americans lived in a world where physical effort occupied many hours of every day. Fields needed tending. Livestock needed care. Water needed carrying. Firewood needed chopping. Clothing needed washing. Buildings needed repairing. Even simple tasks demanded energy. Meals were expected to provide that energy. People did not usually think about food in terms of calories or nutrition as modern people often do. Instead, they thought about strength, endurance, satisfaction, the ability to work from morning until evening. A good meal was one that stayed with you. One that helped you through the day. One that kept hunger away until the next meal arrived. This is one reason why so many 19th century foods were hearty and filling. Bread, cornmeal, beans, potatoes, porridge. These foods provided dependable nourishment. They were not always exciting, but they were trusted. Trust mattered. As the fire comes back to life in the kitchen, breakfast preparations begin. Today, perhaps oats are being cooked. Oatmeal appeared in many homes, especially in regions influenced by traditions from Northern Europe. The oats simmer slowly. Steam rises from the pot. The smell is mild and comforting. A little milk may be added. Perhaps a small amount of molasses. Perhaps a sprinkle of salt. The finished bowl is warm against cold morning air. It fills the stomach gently. Many people begin their day exactly this way. Simple foods often survive through generations because they perform their task well. Oatmeal is one of those foods. So is bread. Bread appears once again on the table. It seems to appear everywhere in 19th century America because, in many ways, it does. Few foods were more common. Few foods were more important. Every loaf represented careful planning. The flour had to be obtained. The dough had to be prepared. The baking required skill. Success was never guaranteed. An experienced baker learned through years of practice. The temperature of an oven could vary. The quality of flour could vary. The weather itself could affect the process. Knowledge developed gradually. One loaf at a time. 1 year at a time. Many women became remarkably skilled bakers because they repeated these tasks thousands of times throughout their lives. The kitchen was both workplace and classroom. A place where experience accumulated slowly. As breakfast ends, we follow the day's activities outward once again. The countryside is becoming busier. Farm animals move about their enclosures. Horses are harnessed. Tools are gathered. The sounds of work spread across the landscape. Food production itself occupies much of this labor. Let us spend some time with one of the most important animals on 19th century farms. The pig. Pigs held enormous value. They grew relatively quickly. They could eat a variety of foods. They provided substantial amounts of meat. For many households, raising pigs became an important part of long-term food planning. When autumn arrived and temperatures cooled, hog butchering often took place. This was serious work. Careful work. Necessary work. Families and neighbors sometimes assisted one another. The goal was not simply obtaining fresh meat. The goal was preserving food for the future. Salting. Smoking. Rendering fat. Every useful resource was carefully managed. The resulting products might help sustain a household throughout winter. Lard became particularly important. Modern kitchens often rely on vegetable oils, but 19th century cooking frequently depended on animal fats. Lard served many purposes. It was used for baking, for frying, for pastries, for countless everyday recipes. A container of lard in the kitchen represented another form of preparation. Another example of how families transformed seasonal abundance into year-round security. The same principles applied to cattle. Cows provided milk, butter, cheese, and sometimes beef. A dairy cow could become one of a family's most valuable possessions. Her daily production contributed directly to household meals. Fresh milk appeared regularly. Butter appeared regularly. Cheese appeared regularly. These foods added variety and nourishment to diets that might otherwise become repetitive. Yet even dairy products reflected the limitations of the era. Fresh milk spoiled quickly. Without refrigeration, timing mattered. Milk often moved directly from cow to table with very little delay. People adapted their routines around these realities. Food shaped schedules. Schedules shaped daily life. Now let us visit a small rural market on a bright summer morning. Farm wagons arrive one after another. Wheels crunch softly over dirt roads. Farmers unload baskets, crates, barrels, bundles of produce. Soon the market fills with color. Green vegetables, red berries, golden squash blossoms, fresh herbs. The variety changes with the seasons. In spring, tender greens appear. In summer, abundance seems to spill from every corner. In autumn, apples and pumpkins dominate many displays. Winter offers a more limited selection, often relying on foods that store well. Customers move slowly among the stalls. Conversations unfold. Prices are discussed. News is exchanged. The market serves as both economic center and social gathering place. People come for food, but they also come for connection, for community, for familiarity. The market reminds everyone that they belong to a larger network of relationships. Food helps create those relationships. A farmer grows vegetables. A customer purchases them. A baker buys flour. A miller grinds grain. A dairyman produces cheese. Each person contributes to the larger system. Each depends on the others. This interconnectedness becomes especially visible in growing towns and cities. Urban life in 19th century America continues to expand. More people live away from farms. More people rely on purchased food. This creates new opportunities, new businesses, new food traditions. Bakeries become increasingly important. A bakery before dawn is a remarkable place. The work begins while much of the town is still asleep. Dough is mixed. Loaves are shaped. Ovens are heated. The scent of baking bread spreads through nearby streets. By morning, customers begin arriving. Fresh loaves disappear quickly. Bread remains one of the most reliable foods available. Its importance crosses social classes. Rich or poor, nearly everyone eats bread. The specific kind may differ. The ingredients may differ. But bread itself remains a constant presence. Not far away, another familiar business operates. The butcher shop. Here customers purchase cuts of meat according to availability and budget. The selection changes over time. Fresh meat remains valuable. Many households use it carefully. Large quantities are not always practical or affordable. Instead, meat often functions as one ingredient among many. A small amount may flavor an entire stew. A small amount may enrich a pot of beans. The goal is often not abundance but efficiency. Making the most of available resources. This philosophy appears again and again throughout 19th century food culture. Nothing should be wasted. Everything should serve a purpose. As midday approaches, the heat of summer becomes more noticeable. Fields shimmer beneath sunlight. Shade becomes welcome. Workers pause briefly for meals. Perhaps cold bread. Perhaps cheese. Perhaps leftovers from earlier cooking. Not every meal requires elaborate preparation. Sometimes simplicity is enough. In fact, much of everyday eating consists of simple foods prepared consistently. History often remembers grand banquets and special celebrations. Yet most people spend far more time eating ordinary meals. The meals that sustain daily life. The meals that repeat week after week. Those are the meals we are exploring. And those meals often reveal more about a society than any feast ever could. Now let us think about another important food. Cabbage. It may not seem especially remarkable. Yet cabbage appeared frequently because it offered many advantages. It grew well. It stored well. It could be prepared in many ways. Fresh cabbage appeared in meals during harvest season. Stored cabbage continued providing nourishment later. Some communities transformed cabbage through fermentation, creating foods that lasted even longer. Practicality once again guided decision-making. Foods that endured earned their place at the table. The same could be said of turnips, carrots, beets, onions. These vegetables filled gardens and cellars across America. Their reliability made them valuable. Their familiarity made them comforting. A family might eat these foods hundreds of times over the years. The repetition did not necessarily create boredom. Instead, it created tradition. A sense of continuity. A connection between past meals and future meals. As afternoon slowly drifts toward evening, smoke begins rising from chimneys once more. Supper preparations are underway. The kitchen becomes active. Knives chop vegetables. Pots warm over fires. Bread is sliced. Milk is poured. The household gathers gradually. One by one. The day begins to loosen its hold. Work gives way to rest. Conversation returns. The evening meal often feels quieter than the meals earlier in the day. The pressure of work has eased. The darkness outside encourages calm. Perhaps someone speaks about the weather. Perhaps about the harvest. Perhaps about neighbors or relatives. The topics are ordinary. Yet ordinary things form most of life. Food sits at the center of these moments. Not demanding attention. Simply present. Reliable as ever. And as another 19th century day slowly fades into night, the story of what Americans ate every day continues onward through kitchens, markets, gardens, fields, and family tables spread across a vast and changing nation. Night settles quietly across the land. The last traces of daylight disappear beyond distant hills and fields. Windows glow softly in scattered farmhouses. A few lanterns shine along the streets of small towns. The world seems to grow slower as darkness spreads. Inside many homes, the evening meal has ended. Plates have been cleared. Bowls have been stacked. The fire crackles gently. The room carries the lingering scent of bread, vegetables, and wood smoke. For a little while, there is nothing urgent to do. These calm evening hours offer us a chance to look more closely at one of the most important parts of 19th century food culture. Preservation. Modern people often walk into stores and expect food to be available at any time of year. The 19th century worked differently. Food followed the seasons. Nature set the schedule. And because nature set the schedule, families spent enormous amounts of time preparing for the future. A successful household was often one that thought months ahead. Summer was not only for enjoying fresh vegetables. Summer was for preparing for winter. Autumn was not only for harvesting crops. Autumn was for storing them. Every season carried responsibilities. The work of preservation touched nearly every family. Let us imagine a warm day in late summer. The garden is overflowing. Beans hang heavily from vines. Tomatoes ripen beneath the sun. Squash spreads across the ground. The harvest is generous. More food is available than can be eaten immediately. This abundance is wonderful. But it also creates work. Vegetables must be prepared. Some are dried. Some are pickled. Some are stored in cool places. Nothing should be lost. Each preserved vegetable represents future nourishment. Future security. Future comfort. The same process unfolds with fruit. Peaches ripen quickly. Berries ripen quickly. Cherries ripen quickly. Their seasons are brief. Families know that if they wish to enjoy these fruits later, action must be taken soon. Large kettles appear in kitchens. Fruit is cooked. Preserves are prepared. Jars are filled. Shelves gradually become lined with carefully stored food. The sight brings satisfaction. Not because the work is easy, but because the work means something. Every jar represents preparation. Every jar represents peace of mind. When winter snow eventually covers the ground, these shelves will continue feeding the household. As we move through the 19th century, canning gradually becomes more common. The process improves over time. More families begin preserving foods in sealed containers. This development quietly changes everyday life. People gain additional ways to save seasonal abundance. The possibility of enjoying summer flavors during winter becomes more realistic. Yet even with these improvements, preservation still requires patience and effort. There are no shortcuts. Only careful work. And careful work defines much of 19th century cooking. Now let us return to the kitchen itself. Few rooms reveal more about everyday life. The kitchen is rarely silent. Even when meals are not being prepared, something is often happening. Bread dough may be rising. Beans may be soaking. Butter may be churning. Herbs may be drying. The room serves many purposes at once. It is a workplace. A gathering place. A place of learning. A place of memory. Children grow up surrounded by its routines. They learn through observation. A young child watches bread being kneaded. Later, that child helps knead the dough. Eventually, years later, that child becomes the baker. Knowledge passes quietly from one generation to the next. Not through textbooks. Not through lectures. Through repetition. Through practice. Through daily life. Many recipes remain unwritten. Measurements are carried in memory. A baker knows how the dough should feel. A cook knows how a stew should smell. Experience becomes a guide. The hands remember. The eyes remember. The ears remember. This type of knowledge develops slowly. One meal at a time. One season at a time. One year at a time. Outside the kitchen, another important food source deserves our attention. The chicken yard. Chickens are among the most common animals in 19th century America. They require care, but they provide steady rewards. Eggs appear regularly. Fresh eggs become a dependable source of nourishment. Unlike some foods that arrive only during harvest season, eggs can be available throughout much of the year. A child sent to collect eggs each morning participates in a routine repeated across countless farms. The task seems small. Yet small tasks often support larger systems. A basket of eggs contributes directly to household meals. Breakfasts become more substantial. Baking becomes easier. Nutrition improves. The humble egg quietly earns its place at the table. Eggs appear in many forms. Fried, boiled, scrambled, baked into breads and cakes, added to puddings, mixed into dough. Their usefulness makes them especially valuable. The same can be said of chickens themselves. When prepared for meals, they provide meat that can supplement the household diet. Nothing extravagant. Simply another reliable source of nourishment. Reliability remains one of the recurring themes of 19th century food. The most valued foods are often not the rarest. They are the most dependable. The foods people can count on. The foods that appear year after year. Season after season. Generation after generation. As dawn breaks over another day in our story, let us travel southward. The American South possesses its own food traditions, shaped by climate, geography, history, and culture. Corn remains important here, just as it does elsewhere. Cornbread appears frequently on tables. Its texture and flavor vary from household to household. Some versions are sweeter. Others more savory. Recipes differ. Preferences differ. Yet cornbread remains familiar. Comforting. Practical. In many southern kitchens, the scent of cornbread baking becomes part of everyday life. The loaf emerges golden and warm. Steam escapes when it is cut. Butter melts across the surface. The simple combination provides immense satisfaction. Greens also hold an important place in many southern meals. Different varieties appear depending on season and region. These vegetables offer flavor, nutrition, and variety. Prepared slowly, often with careful seasoning, they become a familiar companion to bread and other staples. The South also produces important crops such as rice in suitable areas. Rice becomes woven into local food traditions. Prepared in countless ways, it helps sustain communities throughout the region. Food always reflects place. Climate influences crops. Crops influence meals. Meals influence traditions. Over time, traditions become part of cultural identity. Now let us continue westward once again. The expanding frontier presents different challenges. Distance shapes everyday life. Markets may be far away. Neighbors may be far away. Families often depend heavily on their own skills and resources. A garden becomes especially valuable. Livestock becomes especially valuable. Knowledge becomes especially valuable. The ability to bake bread, preserve food, grow vegetables. These skills contribute directly to survival and comfort. Many frontier meals are simple by necessity. Yet simplicity does not mean a lack of care. A well-prepared meal still offers warmth. Still offers satisfaction. Still offers a sense of home. A pot of stew shared around a table in a frontier cabin carries the same basic purpose as a meal served in an older eastern town. To nourish. To comfort. To bring people together. As afternoon arrives, we find ourselves near a river. Waterways play an important role in 19th century America. Rivers transport goods, connect communities, support local economies. They also provide food. Fish become an important part of many regional diets. Different rivers offer different species. Different coastal areas offer different catches. Fresh fish often appears in communities located near reliable water sources. The preparation varies widely. Some fish are fried, some baked, some preserved, some added to stews. The exact method depends on local traditions and available ingredients. Along coastal regions, seafood contributes significantly to everyday meals. Fishing communities develop food cultures shaped by the ocean. The sea becomes both workplace and pantry. Again and again, geography shapes diet. The land and water surrounding people influence what appears on their tables. As evening approaches once more, we return to the familiar comfort of the household kitchen. The fire glows warmly. The room feels welcoming. A loaf of bread rests nearby. Vegetables simmer in a pot. Perhaps apples wait in a basket. Perhaps cheese sits on a shelf. Perhaps beans cook slowly as they have done countless times before. The scene is ordinary. Yet it is precisely this ordinariness that makes it meaningful. History often focuses on extraordinary moments. But most lives are built from ordinary days. Ordinary meals. Ordinary routines. The meals eaten in these kitchens rarely appeared in newspapers. They rarely entered official records. Yet they sustained the nation. Farmers. Teachers. Blacksmiths. Shopkeepers. Children. Parents. Grandparents. All depended on food prepared in places much like this. And so, as the evening grows quiet and the fire settles into a steady glow, we continue our gentle journey through the everyday foods of 19th century America, following the rhythms of seasons, kitchens, and family tables that shaped countless ordinary lives. The fire burns low once again. Outside, the night stretches peacefully across fields, forests, rivers, and growing towns. The stars shine above a nation that is still changing, still expanding, still finding its shape through the quiet routines of ordinary people. In thousands of homes, families sleep. Bread rests beneath cloth covers. Root cellars sit cool and silent beneath the ground. Smoke houses stand dark beside barns. Barrels of preserved food wait patiently for future meals. The work of feeding a household never truly ends. It only pauses. And before long, another morning arrives. The first pale light touches rooftops and treetops. Birdsong begins. A rooster calls. The familiar rhythm starts again. For many Americans in the 19th century, one of the most important foods waiting in the kitchen is flour. Flour appears so often that it can be easy to overlook its importance. Yet flour helps create an astonishing variety of meals. Bread, biscuits, pancakes, dumplings, pies, cakes. Countless recipes begin with a simple sack of flour. The quality of flour matters greatly. A household may purchase it from a local mill. Or perhaps grain is grown nearby and brought to be ground. Either way, flour becomes one of the quiet foundations of everyday eating. A well-stocked pantry often includes flour because flour represents possibilities. With flour, a cook can create meals from relatively simple ingredients. This flexibility makes it valuable. And flexibility is something 19th century households appreciate. Circumstances change. Harvests vary. Weather shifts. Resources rise and fall. A versatile ingredient becomes a trusted companion. This trust is especially visible in the making of biscuits. Across many regions of America, biscuits become a beloved part of daily life. Fresh biscuits emerging from an oven fill a room with warmth and inviting aromas. The crust may be lightly golden, the interior soft and tender. Served with butter, jam, molasses, or simply by themselves, biscuits provide comfort as well as nourishment. Like many traditional foods, they seem simple. Yet simplicity often hides skill. An experienced baker knows exactly how much mixing is needed. Too much can change the texture. Too little can create other problems. Years of practice guide the process. These small details matter. They are part of the accumulated wisdom passed through generations. As the morning continues, let us step into another important space. The root cellar. In many 19th century homes, the root cellar serves as a quiet guardian against hunger. Usually located underground or partially underground, it remains cooler than the surrounding air. This cool environment helps preserve food. The root cellar does not look particularly impressive. Its walls may be rough. Its shelves simple. Its floor made of packed earth. Yet inside rests a remarkable collection of stored nourishment. Potatoes, turnips, carrots, beets, apples, cabbages. Perhaps onions hanging in bundles. Perhaps jars of preserved food lining shelves. Each item represents work completed months earlier. Each item represents planning. Families entering winter often feel reassured by a full cellar. The sight offers peace of mind. Food security is never taken for granted. A well-stocked cellar suggests that the household is prepared for the months ahead. Preparedness brings comfort. The same comfort can be found in another storage space. The pantry. Pantries vary greatly from one home to another. Some are large. Some small. Some contain impressive supplies. Others contain only necessities. But regardless of size, the pantry often reflects the habits of the household. Shelves may hold flour, cornmeal, beans, tea, coffee, sugar, molasses, dried fruits, preserved vegetables. Every item has a purpose. Every item contributes to future meals. The pantry tells a story of planning. A story of responsibility. A story of daily life. As we continue our journey through 19th century food culture, we begin to notice how much attention is devoted to the future. People are rarely thinking only about today's meal. They are also thinking about next week, next month, next winter. Food encourages long-term thinking. A harvest gathered in autumn may still be feeding a family many months later. Preparation stretches across seasons. The connection between present and future remains strong. Now let us visit a household during harvest season. The air is crisp. Leaves have begun changing color. Fields glow with shades of gold and brown. Autumn brings beauty, but it also brings urgency. There is much work to do. Crops must be gathered before weather changes. Vegetables must be stored. Fruit must be preserved. Grain must be processed. Every day matters. Yet amid all this activity, there is also satisfaction. Harvest season provides visible evidence of months of effort. The garden rows are full. The orchard is productive. The barns contain supplies. The family can see the results of its labor. This satisfaction often appears at the dinner table. Meals during harvest season may include fresh vegetables gathered only hours earlier. Fresh apples. fresh squash, fresh corn, fresh beans. The abundance feels tangible, visible. The flavors of autumn arrive directly from field to kitchen. Pumpkins deserve special attention during the season. Pumpkins appear frequently in 19th century America. They grow well in many areas. They store effectively. They can be prepared in various ways. Pumpkin pies become a familiar sight. Pumpkin soups appear in some households. Even the presence of pumpkins near homes contributes to the visual landscape of autumn. Large orange shapes resting near barns and fences become part of seasonal life. The pumpkin's usefulness ensures its popularity. Again we encounter the same pattern. Practical foods earn lasting places at the table. As evening approaches, the harvest workers return home. Their clothing carries traces of dust and field work. Their hands show signs of labor. They are hungry. The supper table awaits. Perhaps there is stew tonight. Stew remains one of the most practical foods imaginable. A single pot can combine vegetables, meat, herbs, and broth. The ingredients cook together slowly. Flavors blend. Tough cuts of meat become tender. Vegetables soften. The result is nourishing and satisfying. Stew also adapts easily. Different ingredients create different versions. The recipe changes according to season, region, and household resources. No two stews are exactly alike. Yet all share the same basic purpose. To make the most of available ingredients. To feed people well. To provide comfort after a long day. The popularity of stew reveals much about 19th century cooking. Efficiency matters. Waste is avoided. Flavor is appreciated. Resources are respected. A good stew embodies these values perfectly. Nearby, another pot may contain soup. Soup shares many of the same advantages. It stretches ingredients. Provides warmth. Offers nourishment. And during cold weather, few meals feel more welcome. Winter soups often rely heavily on stored foods. Root vegetables. Beans. Preserved meats. The ingredients may seem modest. Yet careful preparation transforms them into something deeply satisfying. As darkness falls outside, the household gathers near the fire. The meal has ended. Conversation continues quietly. The warmth of the hearth fills the room. This setting appears again and again throughout 19th century America. Different homes. Different regions. Different families. Yet similar scenes. Food has brought everyone together. Not through luxury. Not through extravagance. Through consistency. Through care. Through daily effort. Now let us turn our attention to something sweeter. Desserts existed in 19th century America, though not necessarily in the constant abundance familiar to later generations. Special ingredients often required expense or effort. Sugar, spices, and certain fruits were valuable. As a result, sweet foods sometimes carried a sense of occasion. Simple cakes appeared. Fruit pies appeared. Puddings appeared. Cookies appeared. The exact recipes varied widely. But all offered small moments of pleasure. Apple pie remains especially beloved. Its popularity grows throughout the century. A well-made apple pie combines familiar ingredients into something comforting and memorable. The crust requires skill. The filling depends on good fruit. The aroma fills the house as it bakes. Even before the pie reaches the table, it creates anticipation. Food affects more than hunger. It affects mood, memory, emotion. A familiar scent can transport someone back through years of experience. The smell of baking bread. The smell of apple pie. The smell of coffee. These become part of personal histories. Part of family histories. Part of national histories. As the evening deepens, lantern light flickers gently across the room. The day's work is finished. Tomorrow's work waits patiently. Somewhere in the pantry, preserved food rests on shelves. Somewhere in the cellar, vegetables wait in cool darkness. Somewhere in the barn, animals settle for the night. The entire household participates in a larger cycle. Planting, growing, harvesting, preserving, cooking, eating, repeating, year after year, generation after generation. And as another peaceful night settles over 19th century America, we continue our slow and steady journey through the foods that nourished everyday life, following the quiet paths that connect fields to kitchens, seasons to meals, and families to the tables around which so much of life unfolded. The night passes gently. Moonlight fades from fields and rooftops. The stars slowly disappear into the growing brightness of dawn. Across the countryside, a thin mist settles over meadows and streams, creating a landscape that seems almost suspended between sleeping and waking. Then, little by little, the day begins again. A door opens. Boots touch the ground. A bucket is lifted. A fire is stirred. The ordinary rhythm of 19th century America returns. These small actions may seem unremarkable, yet they form the foundation of daily life. Food does not simply appear on tables. It begins here, in these early moments, in the quiet work performed before most of the world is fully awake. As the kitchen warms, let us spend some time with another important feature of American food culture during the 1800s. The kitchen garden. For many families, the garden was not a hobby. It was a necessity. The difference was important. Today a garden might provide extra vegetables or a pleasant way to spend time outdoors. In the 19th century, a garden often played a direct role in feeding a household. Its success mattered. Its failure mattered. People watched their gardens closely. They noticed changes in weather. They watched for insects. They worried about drought. They worried about storms. The garden occupied both physical space and mental space. Rows of vegetables stretched across carefully worked soil. Beans climbed poles. Peas climbed trellises. Cabbages grew steadily larger. Onions pushed their roots deeper into the earth. Every plant represented future meals. The connection between labor and food remained visible everywhere. A family could walk through the garden and see tomorrow's dinner growing beneath the sun. This visibility created a deep appreciation for food. Meals were not abstract. People knew exactly how much effort stood behind them. A bowl of beans was not merely a bowl of beans. It represented planting, weeding, harvesting, cooking, planning, patience. All these invisible ingredients accompanied the visible ones. As morning continues, children often play a role in these routines. Many young people in 19th century America contributed to household work from an early age. Their responsibilities varied according to age, location, and circumstance, but food-related tasks appeared frequently. Collecting eggs, helping in gardens, carrying water, gathering fruit, assisting with preservation, learning recipes. These activities taught practical skills. More importantly, they taught responsibility. Food production became part of family life. Knowledge moved naturally from older generations to younger ones. No formal lesson was required. The lesson unfolded through participation. A grandmother showing a child how to preserve apples. A father explaining when corn was ready for harvest. A mother teaching how bread dough should feel beneath the hands. These moments happened quietly. Yet they shaped lives. And through thousands of such moments, food traditions survived. As the sun climbs higher, we find ourselves visiting a small orchard during late summer. The branches bend beneath the weight of fruit. Leaves rustle softly in a warm breeze. Bees move among the remaining blossoms. The scene feels peaceful. Yet the orchard is also productive. Fruit trees provide tremendous value. Unlike annual crops that must be planted again each year, fruit trees continue producing harvest season after season. A healthy tree becomes a long-term investment. A source of nourishment extending far into the future. Apples remain the most common sight. Their importance is difficult to overstate. Many families consume apples in one form or another throughout much of the year. Fresh apples during harvest. Stored apples during winter. Dried apples. Apple butter. Apple pie. Apple sauce. Apple cider. Few foods demonstrate the creativity of 19th century preservation more clearly. Nothing useful should be wasted. A damaged apple might still become cider. A less attractive apple might still become sauce. Resourcefulness guides every decision. The orchard itself changes dramatically with the seasons. Spring fills it with blossoms. Summer brings growth. Autumn brings harvest. Winter brings stillness. Families become deeply familiar with these cycles. The orchard acts as a quiet calendar, marking the passage of time through changing colors, scents, and harvests. Now let us travel toward a growing American town. The streets are busier than those of earlier generations. Shops line the roads. Horses pull wagons through the center of town. Merchants open their doors. Customers begin arriving. Food remains at the heart of much of this activity. A baker arranges fresh loaves in a window. A grocer organizes barrels and sacks. A butcher prepares for the day's business. The town depends upon a constant movement of food. Farmers bring produce inward. Customers carry food outward. The process repeats day after day. The grocer's store offers an interesting glimpse into everyday life. Shelves hold practical necessities. Flour, sugar, coffee, tea, molasses, beans, rice, spices. Barrels contain goods sold by weight or measure. Customers purchase only what they need and can afford. The shopping experience feels different from later eras. Food often arrives in simple forms. Little packaging. Little advertising. The emphasis remains on utility. A family purchases ingredients. Then transforms those ingredients into meals at home. Cooking remains central to daily life. Prepared convenience foods are limited. Skill and labor fill the gap. This reality gives kitchens tremendous importance. The kitchen is where raw ingredients become nourishment. Where planning becomes reality. Where daily life unfolds. As midday approaches, we encounter another familiar food. Rice pudding. Simple puddings appear in many forms throughout the 19th century. They provide comfort. They make use of available ingredients. Rice, milk, eggs, and sweeteners can be combined into satisfying desserts or side dishes. Such foods reveal something important about 19th century cooking. People often create pleasure from modest ingredients. Luxury is not always required. Careful preparation can transform simple foods into memorable ones. The same principle applies to bread pudding. A practical cook understands that older bread still possesses value. Instead of discarding it, the bread becomes part of a new dish. This habit appears repeatedly throughout 19th century kitchens. Waste is the enemy. Creativity is the solution. Meals emerge from ingenuity as much as from ingredients. Now the afternoon sun warms the landscape. Farmers continue their work. Merchants continue their trade. Children continue their chores. And kitchens continue preparing food. One food appearing frequently in many regions is the potato. Potatoes possess nearly every quality 19th century households admire. They grow reliably, store well, provide nourishment, adapt to countless recipes. Boiled potatoes appear on tables. Mashed potatoes appear on tables. Potatoes enter soups and stews. Potatoes accompany meats and vegetables. They become so familiar that many people barely notice them. Yet their quiet reliability helps sustain entire communities. Sometimes the most important foods are not the most celebrated. They are simply the foods that never fail to appear when needed. The potato earns this reputation. So do onions. Onions rarely receive special attention. Yet they contribute flavor to an enormous number of dishes. A cook reaching for onions is participating in a tradition repeated countless times across generations. Their usefulness secures their place in the kitchen. Small ingredients often play large roles. As afternoon slowly begins its journey toward evening, we turn our attention to hospitality. Visitors frequently appear in 19th century homes. Neighbors stop by. Relatives arrive. Travelers pass through. Offering food or drink becomes an important social custom. A guest may receive coffee, tea, bread, pie, preserves. The specific offering depends on resources and circumstances. The gesture itself matters. Hospitality reflects values: generosity, respect, community. Food often serves as the language through which these values are expressed. A slice of pie shared with a neighbor becomes more than dessert. It becomes a social bond. A cup of coffee becomes a conversation. A loaf of bread becomes a welcome. Meals help build relationships. They create opportunities for connection. This social dimension of food is easy to overlook when discussing ingredients and recipes. Yet it is one of the most important aspects of eating. People rarely eat only for nourishment. They also eat together. And when they eat together, food becomes part of human relationships. As the sun sinks lower, supper preparations begin once more. The routine feels familiar now. A fire is tended. Ingredients are gathered. Pots begin to simmer. The day's work approaches its conclusion. Perhaps tonight's meal includes vegetables from the garden, bread from yesterday's baking, cheese from local dairy production, maybe a small amount of preserved meat. Nothing extraordinary. Only the kinds of foods that appear again and again throughout ordinary life. Yet these ordinary foods sustain extraordinary numbers of people. They support families, communities, towns, entire regions. They are the quiet foundation beneath larger historical events. Wars may be fought. Railroads may be built. Cities may grow. But every person involved still needs breakfast. Still needs dinner. Still needs supper. History moves forward on countless ordinary meals. The evening grows darker. Lantern light fills the room. The fire glows softly. Outside, crickets begin their nightly songs. Inside, the household settles into another peaceful evening. Tomorrow will bring new work, new meals, new routines. Yet many things will remain unchanged. Bread will still be baked. Gardens will still be tended. Food will still connect people to the land, to one another, and to the passing seasons. And so our slow journey through the everyday foods of 19th century America continues, following the quiet rhythms of ordinary lives, one meal, one kitchen, and one peaceful day at a time. Morning arrives once again over the wide landscapes of 19th century America. The first rays of sunlight slide across rooftops, fences, fields, and dirt roads. A light breeze moves through tall grass. Somewhere a rooster announces the beginning of another day. Somewhere else, the distant sound of a wagon wheel breaks the morning quiet. Inside homes across the nation, kitchens slowly awaken. The fire is tended. Water is carried. Ingredients are gathered. The familiar cycle continues. By now, we have spent many days wandering through these kitchens and farmyards. We have watched bread rise, vegetables grow, and stews simmer. Yet there are still countless details waiting quietly within the story of everyday American food. History often focuses on dramatic events. But food history is different. Food history lives in repetition. The same tasks performed day after day. The same recipes passed from one generation to another. The same seasonal routines repeated year after year. These repetitions create a rhythm. A rhythm that shapes daily life. And nowhere is that rhythm more visible than during the changing seasons. Let us begin with spring. After a long winter, spring feels almost like a reward. The frozen ground softens. Streams flow more freely. Birds return. The landscape gradually wakes from its winter rest. For many families, spring also brings relief. Food stores may have grown smaller during the final weeks of winter. Root cellars may no longer seem quite as full as they once did. Preserved supplies may be running low. Fresh food becomes increasingly welcome. The first green shoots appearing in gardens often create quiet excitement. Tender greens become available. Early onions emerge from the soil. Herbs begin growing again. These fresh ingredients provide variety after months of preserved foods. A simple plate of fresh greens can feel remarkable after a winter of stored vegetables. The arrival of spring food reminds people that abundance is returning. The land is producing once more. The growing season has begun. Garden work quickly becomes a priority. Seeds are planted carefully. Rows are marked. Tools are brought out from storage. Every planted seed carries hope. Not certainty. Hope. Weather remains unpredictable. Heavy rains may arrive. Dry periods may arrive. Late frosts may arrive. Farmers and gardeners understand that nature always retains some control. Yet they plant anyway. They prepare. They trust experience. They trust the seasons. As spring gradually becomes summer, the pace of growth increases. Gardens become greener. Fields become fuller. Markets become more colorful. Fresh produce appears in greater quantities. Strawberries may be among the first fruits to arrive. Their season is brief. Families know this. They enjoy them while they can. Perhaps fresh berries are eaten immediately. Perhaps some become preserves. Perhaps some are baked into desserts. The arrival of strawberries feels like a seasonal milestone. A gentle announcement that summer is approaching. Soon other fruits follow. Cherries. Peaches. Plums. Different regions enjoy different harvests, but the pattern remains familiar. Nature provides abundance in waves. One fruit arrives. Then another. Then another. The calendar can almost be read through food. People become highly aware of these patterns. A person living in the 19th century often knows the seasons not only by weather, but by taste. Summer itself transforms many meals. Fresh vegetables become plentiful. Beans, corn, tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, peppers. The garden produces steadily. Families eat fresh foods more frequently. Meals become more colorful, more varied. The work of preserving also begins in earnest. Abundance creates responsibility. Food that cannot be eaten immediately must be saved. Kitchens become busy places. The air grows warm from cooking fires and summer temperatures. Large kettles simmer. Fruit is preserved. Vegetables are prepared for storage. Shelves gradually fill. The work can be tiring. Yet it carries a sense of purpose. Every jar completed today may provide comfort months later. Preparation becomes an act of care. A gift from one season to another. As we continue through the summer landscape, let us spend time at a family table during harvest season. The meal before us is simple. Fresh corn, garden beans, bread, perhaps a little butter, perhaps slices of tomato. Nothing extravagant. Yet every item feels connected to the surrounding land. The corn grew nearby. The beans grew nearby. The bread may have been baked that very day. The meal reflects its environment. Food and place remain closely linked. This connection becomes one of the defining characteristics of 19th century eating. People generally consume what can be grown, raised, traded, or purchased within reasonable distance. The world feels large. Transportation exists, but not yet in the effortless ways that later generations will experience. As a result, regional food cultures develop naturally. The foods available in one area may differ greatly from those available elsewhere. Now let us turn our attention to the American coastline. Fishing communities contribute their own traditions to the nation's diet. The ocean provides valuable resources. Fish, shellfish, other seafood. These foods appear regularly in coastal diets. Early morning fishing boats return with their catches. Markets receive fresh supplies. Families prepare seafood using local methods and traditions. In New England, fish plays an especially important role. Generations of experience shape preparation techniques. The sea becomes part of daily life. Part of local identity. Part of the food culture itself. Farther inland, rivers provide their own resources. Fishing remains important in many communities. A river can supply transportation, water, and food all at once. These waterways help connect settlements while also helping feed them. Again and again, geography influences meals. Mountains, rivers, forests, prairies, coastlines. Each environment shapes food choices in subtle ways. As afternoon sunlight warms the countryside, let us visit another familiar location. The smokehouse. We have passed by it before, but it deserves a closer look. The smokehouse represents one of the most important preservation methods of the era. Inside hangs meat prepared months earlier. The air smells rich and smoky. The room remains cool and dim. Nothing here appears rushed. Everything reflects patience. Smoking meat takes time. Preserving food takes time. Building food security takes time. Time itself becomes an ingredient. A family entering winter with a well-stocked smokehouse feels more confident about the months ahead. Preparedness brings peace of mind. This peace of mind appears again and again throughout 19th century food culture. Much of the work revolves around reducing uncertainty. Harvesting, preserving, storing, planning. These activities create stability in an unpredictable world. Outside, autumn begins approaching. The first hints appear quietly. A slightly cooler breeze. A few changing leaves. Shorter evenings. Soon harvest season will arrive in full force. And harvest season occupies a special place in the story of American food. Fields become busy. Orchards become busy. Gardens become busy. Everyone understands the importance of the work ahead. The harvest must be gathered while conditions remain favorable. The opportunity cannot be postponed indefinitely. Days become full. Wagons move steadily between fields and storage areas. Barns receive supplies. Cellars receive vegetables. Shelves receive preserved foods. The entire household participates in preparation. When the work is complete, the results are visible everywhere. A full pantry. A full cellar. A full smokehouse. A full barn. These sights bring satisfaction. Not because they represent wealth. Because they represent security. Food security is one of the quiet achievements of everyday life. A successful harvest means fewer worries. Fewer uncertainties. More comfort during the long months ahead. As evening settles across the countryside, supper begins. The table gathers family members together once again. The meal may be modest. The meal may be substantial. The exact menu matters less than the ritual itself. The gathering. The sharing. The pause between the day's labor and the night's rest. Food marks these transitions. Breakfast welcomes the day. Dinner sustains the work. Supper closes the evening. These rhythms repeat across generations. The details change. The pattern remains. Now darkness spreads across the fields. Lanterns glow in windows. The sounds of work fade away. Families settle near their hearths. Perhaps someone peels apples. Perhaps someone prepares ingredients for tomorrow. Perhaps someone simply enjoys the warmth of the fire. The connection between food and home feels especially strong at night. Meals are finished. Preparations are made. The household rests. And somewhere nearby, shelves lined with preserved food wait patiently for future seasons. A quiet promise that tomorrow's meals are already beginning to take shape. As another peaceful day comes to an end, our gentle journey through the foods of 19th century America continues onward, following the steady rhythm of seasons, harvests, kitchens, and family tables that sustained ordinary lives across a growing nation. The quiet of the night lingers for a little while longer. A lantern glows faintly in a farmhouse window. Somewhere beyond the fields, an owl calls into the darkness. The wind moves gently through trees that have stood watch over many seasons, many harvests, and many generations. Inside the house, the family sleeps. Yet even while people rest, the work of food continues in small, unseen ways. A loaf of bread dough may be slowly rising beneath a cloth. Apples stored in the cellar wait patiently for winter meals. Cheese ages quietly on a shelf. Preserved vegetables remain sealed in their jars. The household itself seems to breathe slowly through the night. Then, as always, morning returns. The sun rises. The fire is stirred. The kitchen awakens. And another ordinary day begins. By now, one thing has become clear. The story of what Americans ate in the 19th century is really the story of preparation. Meals did not begin in kitchens. They began months earlier. They began with seeds planted in spring. With animals cared for through changing seasons. With orchards tended year after year. With knowledge passed from parents to children. Food was the final result of a much longer process. A loaf of bread on the table represented fields of grain. A bowl of soup represented gardens and storage cellars. A slice of pie represented orchards and preservation work. Every meal contained invisible histories. Every meal connected people to the land. This connection was perhaps strongest among farming families. For them, food and work were inseparable. A person could look out the window and see much of the future menu growing outside. Corn standing tall in the fields. Potatoes beneath the soil. Apple trees heavy with fruit. Cows grazing in pasture. Chickens wandering through the yard. The landscape itself was a pantry in progress. As we move through another morning, let us spend some time with corn. No food appears more frequently in the story of 19th century America. Corn grows successfully across large parts of the country. It adapts to different conditions. It provides impressive yields. It can be used in many ways. Because of these qualities, it becomes one of the great staples of American life. Cornmeal appears on countless tables. Cornbread appears in countless kitchens. Mushes, cakes, porridges, and other preparations become familiar foods from one generation to the next. For many families, corn is not merely one food among many. It is one of the foundations upon which daily eating rests. A field of corn in late summer is a remarkable sight. The stalks rise high above the ground. Leaves rustle softly in the breeze. Sunlight filters through the rows. The field seems alive with movement and sound. Yet beyond its beauty lies practicality. Every ear of corn represents future meals. The harvest matters. The family depends upon it. When autumn arrives, the work begins. Corn must be gathered, stored, protected, prepared. The harvest often involves the entire household. Children help. Parents help. Neighbors sometimes help. The effort reflects the importance of the crop itself. And when winter eventually arrives, the value of that effort becomes clear. Cornmeal stored months earlier continues feeding the family long after the growing season has ended. Nearby, another important crop waits beneath the soil. Potatoes. The potato has become so familiar to many households that it sometimes escapes notice. Yet few foods offer such reliability. Potatoes store well. Provide nourishment. Adapt to many recipes. And grow successfully in numerous regions. For these reasons, they become one of the most dependable foods available. A cellar stocked with potatoes offers reassurance. A meal containing potatoes offers satisfaction. The potato rarely demands attention. It simply does its job. Quietly. Consistently. Year after year. Many foods earn their place in history through popularity. The potato earns its place through usefulness. Now let us leave the fields for a time and visit a small town during market day. The streets are lively. Wagons arrive carrying produce. Merchants prepare their displays. Customers move from stall to stall. Voices blend into a steady hum of conversation. The market reveals something important about 19th century food culture. Food is local. People generally know where it comes from. The farmer selling apples may live only a few miles away. The baker may be someone customers know personally. The dairy products may come from nearby farms. Distance between producer and consumer remains relatively short. This creates a different relationship with food. People understand the seasons because they see them reflected in the market. When strawberries arrive, everyone notices. When apples appear, everyone notices. When fresh vegetables become abundant, everyone notices. The market acts almost like a calendar. Its changing offerings announce the progress of the year. As we walk through the market, the scent of fresh bread drifts through the air. The bakery nearby has been busy since before dawn. Bakers often begin work while the rest of the town still sleeps. Flour is mixed. Dough is kneaded. Loaves are shaped. Ovens are heated. The process requires effort and attention. By morning, shelves are filled with warm bread. Customers arrive steadily. Bread remains one of the most important foods in daily life. It accompanies soups, stews, vegetables, meats, breakfasts, suppers. Almost every meal seems to welcome bread in some form. Its versatility makes it indispensable. Its familiarity makes it comforting. And its smell remains one of the most beloved scents in the 19th century kitchen. Not far from the bakery stands the general store. The store provides items that families cannot easily produce themselves. Coffee, tea, sugar, certain spices, various supplies. These goods travel longer distances before reaching local shelves. Their presence reminds us that 19th century America is gradually becoming more connected. Roads improve. Canals expand trade. Railroads begin transforming transportation. Food slowly becomes part of larger networks. Yet despite these changes, most meals remain rooted in local ingredients and local labor. The kitchen still serves as the center of food preparation. Now afternoon sunlight spreads across town. Work continues. Shops remain busy. Wagons come and go. And somewhere in a nearby home, supper preparations have already begun. The evening meal occupies a special place in family life. Unlike the busy breakfast hours or the work-centered midday meal, supper often arrives when the day's major tasks are complete. People can finally slow down. The atmosphere changes. The pace softens. Perhaps vegetables simmer in a pot. Perhaps bread rests on the table. Perhaps cheese and preserved fruit accompany the meal. The exact foods matter less than the sense of gathering. The table brings people together. For a short time, work gives way to conversation. Concerns are set aside. The household enjoys a moment of rest. This social role of food is important. Meals do more than provide nourishment. They create structure. They create routine. They create opportunities for connection. A family may not remember every meal it eats. Yet the habit of gathering remains significant. Over years and decades, these shared meals help shape relationships. As evening deepens, let us turn our attention to beverages. Coffee continues growing in popularity throughout the 19th century. Many households begin their days with it. The aroma fills kitchens. The warmth provides comfort on cold mornings. Coffee becomes part of daily routine for countless Americans. Tea remains important as well. Different households develop different preferences. Some favor coffee. Some favor tea. Some enjoy both. The preparation itself often becomes ritualized. Water is heated. Cups are prepared. The drink is served. Simple actions repeated countless times become part of the texture of everyday life. Milk remains another common beverage, especially in rural areas where dairy animals are available. Fresh milk often moves quickly from farmyard to table. Again we see the close relationship between food production and food consumption. The distance between source and meal remains remarkably small. Outside, the first stars begin appearing in the sky. The evening grows cooler. The fire glows warmly. The kitchen settles into a quieter mood. Tomorrow will bring more work. More cooking. More harvesting. More planning. Yet for now, the household rests. The pantry remains stocked. The cellar remains cool. The smokehouse stands ready. The garden waits for tomorrow's attention. Everything feels connected. Fields to kitchens. Seasons to meals. Labor to nourishment. Past generations to future generations. And as another peaceful day fades gently into the night, our slow walk through the everyday foods of 19th century America continues, following the steady, comforting rhythms that sustained millions of ordinary lives across the century. Night deepens once again across the land. The sky is wide and quiet, filled with steady stars that seem to watch over fields, rivers, and towns that have grown slowly through the 19th century. Inside homes, lamps are dimmed. Fires settle into glowing embers. The world becomes softer, slower, almost still. And yet, even in this stillness, the story of food continues. Not in movement, but in memory. In preparation. In waiting. Because in the 19th century, food is never only about the moment it is eaten. It is always about what came before, and what will come after. Let us return, gently, to the kitchen. The center of the home. A place where time feels different. Where mornings begin before sunrise, and evenings end long after darkness has settled outside. In this quiet space, many of the most important foods of everyday life are shaped. Bread, once again, stands at the heart of it all. We have seen it before, but it is worth lingering here a little longer. Bread is not just a food. It is a process. It begins with grain in the field. Then the harvest. Then the mill. Then flour carried home in sacks or barrels. Then water, salt, and careful hands. In many homes, bread making is not something rushed. It is part of the rhythm of life. Dough is mixed slowly. Kneaded with steady pressure. Left to rest in a warm corner of the kitchen. Then watched. Not with impatience, but with attention. Because in a world without precise timers or modern ovens, experience becomes the guide. A cook learns to read the dough. Its softness. Its rise. Its quiet transformation. And when it is finally placed in the oven or near the hearth, the house begins to change. The smell spreads. Warm. Familiar. Deeply comforting. It drifts through wooden rooms and narrow hallways. It settles into clothing, into memory, into the feeling of home itself. Alongside bread, another food appears again and again in 19th century kitchens. Beans. Simple. Steady. Reliable. Beans are the kind of food that asks for patience. They are soaked. Then boiled. Then simmered slowly over heat that never feels hurried. A pot of beans can sit for hours. Softening. Thickening. Taking on the flavor of whatever is available. Salt. Onion. A piece of pork if the household has it. Nothing more is required. Beans are not dramatic. They do not announce themselves. They simply provide nourishment, day after day, season after season. In many homes, a pot of beans represents stability. Something certain in a life that often depends on weather, harvests, and luck. Now, let us step outside for a moment. The night air is cool. The ground holds the memory of the day's warmth. In farmyards, animals are settled. Barn doors are closed. Water troughs are quiet. And in the distance, the land stretches out in soft darkness. This is the same land that feeds the kitchens. The same land that produces corn, wheat, potatoes, and fruit. Everything is connected. The fields do not feel separate from the home. They are an extension of it. A larger, open pantry under the sky. As we move through this quiet night, let us think about another essential part of 19th century food life. Milk. Milk is one of the most time-sensitive foods of the era. It cannot wait. It must be used quickly. In many households, milk becomes part of a daily routine that feels almost constant. Morning milking. Evening milking. The rhythm repeats without pause. Cows are cared for regardless of weather. Rain or sun. Heat or cold. And in return, they provide something that becomes central to the household diet. Fresh milk. From this milk comes butter. From this milk comes cheese. Butter, especially, becomes one of the most important kitchen staples. It is churned slowly. The process takes time. Sometimes it feels endless. Cream is stirred and shaken until it transforms. What was once liquid becomes solid. Soft, rich, and golden. This transformation is not just physical. It feels almost symbolic. As if the effort of the household itself is condensed into something tangible. Cheese, too, carries its own quiet importance. It lasts longer than milk. It stores better. It becomes a way of preserving nutrition across time. A wheel of cheese resting in a cool cellar is more than food. It is preparation made visible. Now we turn again to the garden. Even in the stillness of night, the garden remains important. Not active now, but alive in potential. Seeds resting in soil. Roots waiting beneath the surface. Plants that will return with the next season. In 19th century life, the garden is never truly finished. It is a cycle. A return. A rhythm that repeats with the year. Spring planting. Summer growth. Autumn harvest. Winter rest. Then again. And again. Within this cycle, vegetables form the backbone of many meals. Cabbage. Carrots. Onions. Turnips. Beets. These are not rare foods. They are everyday foods. Foods that appear in pot after pot, meal after meal. Their value lies not in luxury, but in endurance. They store well. They cook easily. They fill the body. Now let us return to the kitchen fire once more. It is lower now. The household is preparing for sleep. But even here, food continues its quiet presence. A covered pot on the hearth. A loaf wrapped in cloth. A jar on a shelf catching faint light from a lamp. Everything has its place. Everything has its purpose. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is wasted. And in this slow order, life becomes manageable. Predictable, even in an unpredictable world. Across 19th century America, this predictability is deeply valued. Because so much else is uncertain. Weather changes without warning. Crops fail or succeed depending on forces beyond control. Illness arrives unexpectedly. Markets rise and fall. But food, when properly prepared, offers something steady. A way to respond to uncertainty. A way to endure it. As we remain in this quiet night, let us think of the broader landscape again. The farms. The towns. The rivers. The growing roads that slowly connect distant places. Food moves along these paths. Wagons carry grain. Boats carry goods along waterways. New rail lines begin to change how quickly food can travel. But even as movement increases, the heart of food life remains unchanged. The kitchen. It is still where raw ingredients become meals. Still where knowledge is passed down. Still where daily life is anchored. In many ways, the 19th century kitchen is not just a place. It is a system. A center of transformation. A place where time, effort, and nature come together in simple, repeated acts. Now, as the night reaches its deepest point, the house grows still. Only the faint sound of wind outside. Only the quiet presence of stored food waiting for tomorrow. And in this stillness, we see something that defines the entire century of everyday eating. Not abundance. Not luxury. But continuity. The steady return of meals. The steady work of preparation. The steady care that keeps families fed through seasons and years. And as we move gently forward through this long, quiet history of American food, the night continues its slow passage toward another morning. Morning returns again, as it always does. Not suddenly, but slowly like a soft unfolding. The sky lightens in gentle stages. Dark blue becomes gray. Gray becomes pale gold. And finally, light settles over fields, roofs, and quiet roads. In the 19th century home, this is the moment when the kitchen begins to wake. Not with noise, but with habit. A hand reaches for wood. A fire is revived from embers. Water is drawn. The kettle is placed back into its familiar position near the heat. Everything begins again in the same order it began yesterday. And the day before that. And the day before that. In this repetition, there is comfort. Now let us spend a little time with something that appears in almost every 19th century kitchen in one form or another. Cornmeal. Cornmeal is simple. Ground grain. Yet its importance is enormous. It appears in breakfast. It appears in dinner. It appears in supper. It appears in times of abundance. It appears in times of scarcity. Cornmeal mush is one of its most common forms. A pot of water heated over a fire. Cornmeal stirred slowly into it. The mixture thickens gradually. Patient stirring is required. There is no rushing this process. The texture changes slowly, like time itself becoming visible. When finished, it may be eaten warm, soft, filling, sometimes with milk, sometimes with molasses, sometimes plain. In some households, cornmeal becomes cornbread. Poured into pans. Baked until firm. The edges slightly crisp. The center soft and warm. Cornbread is not only food. It is stability in edible form. It belongs to ordinary days. And ordinary days make up most of life. As the morning continues, let us walk again into the world outside the kitchen. The farmyard is active now. Chickens move across the ground. Horses shift in their stalls. Cows wait calmly for milking. Every animal has its place in the rhythm of the household. Each one contributes in its own way. Eggs. Milk. Meat. Work. Even the smallest contributions matter. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything is part of a larger balance. Now we turn to another essential feature of 19th century food life. The act of preservation. We have touched on it before, but it deserves to be felt more deeply. Preservation is not just a task. It is a mindset. A way of thinking ahead. In summer, when gardens are full, families do not only eat. They prepare. They dry herbs. They pickle cucumbers. They boil fruit into preserves. They salt meat. They fill jars and barrels. They hang food in cool spaces. They transform abundance into storage. This work often fills kitchens for days at a time. Steam rises from large pots. The smell of fruit and sugar fills the air. Hands move steadily through repetitive tasks. Peeling, stirring, pouring, sealing, labeling. Each jar becomes a small container of time. A moment of summer captured and held for winter. When winter arrives, those jars are opened one by one. And in that moment, the distance between seasons disappears. Summer returns briefly. Not in weather, but in taste. This idea shapes much of 19th century food life. Food is not only consumed, it is carried across time. Now let us move toward a different setting. A rural crossroads where a small mill stands beside moving water. The mill is simple in structure. Wooden. Practical. But its role is essential. Here, grain becomes flour. Corn becomes meal. Wheat becomes something that can be turned into bread. The sound of the mill is steady. Water turns the wheel. The wheel turns the machinery. The machinery transforms raw grain into something usable. Farmers arrive with sacks. They leave with flour. This exchange connects fields to kitchens. Without the mill, the kitchen cannot function in the same way. It is one of the invisible pillars of everyday food life. Now let us return once more to the kitchen table. It is midday. Sunlight enters through small windows. Dust particles drift gently in the air. A simple meal is being prepared. Bread. Soup. Perhaps leftover vegetables from yesterday. Perhaps beans cooked slowly in a pot. There is nothing elaborate here. But there is something steady. Something dependable. Meals like this appear across the nation. In cabins. In farmhouses. In small town homes. In frontier settlements. Different places. Similar rhythms. Food binds these places together. Not through identical recipes, but through shared needs. Hunger, work, rest, and nourishment. As the afternoon approaches, we step into another familiar scene. The orchard again. But now in a slightly different season. Apples are no longer just growing. They are beginning to ripen. The branches hold more weight. The air carries a faint sweetness. Harvest time is approaching. Families begin to prepare. Baskets are brought out. Ladders are checked. Storage spaces are cleared. Because when apples are ready, they are ready all at once. Not slowly, but in abundance. This abundance requires effort. Apples must be picked, sorted, stored, pressed, cooked, dried, or shared. Nothing can be left to waste. The orchard becomes a place of movement. Quiet but constant. Even children take part. Collecting fallen fruit. Carrying baskets. Helping in small but meaningful ways. The work is repetitive. But it is also familiar. and familiarity brings a kind of ease. Now we turn again toward the town. The streets are busier now. Commerce is growing. Trade is expanding. Goods move more frequently between regions. Yet even here, food remains close to daily life. Markets still reflect seasons. Stores still depend on local supply chains. People still recognize the origins of much of what they eat. The separation between producer and consumer is growing. But it has not yet fully widened. There is still a sense of connection. A sense of visibility. A sense that food has a story you can trace. As evening begins to approach, kitchens become active once more. The familiar rhythm returns. Fire. Water. Pots. Bread. Vegetables. Leftovers. The ingredients of daily life come together again. Perhaps tonight there is stew. Perhaps soup. Perhaps baked bread fresh from the oven. Perhaps a simple meal of milk and bread shared quietly around the table. The details vary. But the pattern remains unchanged. Food brings the household together. Not dramatically. Not ceremonially. But gently. Repeatedly. Naturally. And as the light outside fades once more, and the stars begin to appear above 19th century America, the day closes in the same way it has closed for generations. With quiet kitchens, full pantries, and the steady promise that tomorrow's meals are already beginning to take shape. Night settles again, slowly, like a soft blanket laid over fields, towns, and distant rivers. The world outside grows quiet. Not empty. Just still. In 19th century America, night is not only rest. It is also continuation. Many things continue even when people sleep. Food is one of them. In cellars, jars remain lined in careful rows. In smokehouses, meat hangs in patient silence. In barns, grain waits in sacks. In kitchens, the last warmth of the hearth fades into ashes. Everything is paused. But nothing is forgotten. And when morning returns, everything will be used again. Let us now move gently into another part of this long food story. The importance of stored grain. Grain is the quiet foundation of the entire century's diet. Wheat, corn, rye, oats. Each one carries a different role, but all of them share one purpose: to become food that can last. Stored grain is not just a supply. It is security. A full bin of grain means bread in the future. It means porridge in winter. It means survival during uncertain times. Families in the 19th century often think in this way without needing to say it out loud. A full storage room brings peace. A nearly empty one brings concern. Now let us imagine a barn interior. Dim light enters through small gaps in the wood. Dust floats gently in the air. Sacks are stacked carefully along the walls. Each sack contains grain that represents weeks or months of labor. Planting, harvesting, threshing, drying, transporting. All of it is compressed into these simple forms, resting quietly in storage. A person entering this space does not just see food. They see time. Now we return to the kitchen again. A pot is placed over the fire. Water begins to heat. The sound is soft at first. Then steady. Then gently rising. This is the beginning of another simple meal. Perhaps oatmeal. Perhaps soup. Perhaps a porridge made from cornmeal or wheat. These meals are not defined by complexity. They are defined by reliability. A bowl that warms the body. A meal that satisfies hunger. A routine that repeats without question. As the morning continues, let us think about another quiet but essential part of 19th century food life. The butter churn. The churn is a symbol of patience. Cream is poured inside. Then the work begins. Up and down. Or around and around. The motion continues for a long time. There is no shortcut. Only rhythm. Only effort. Only waiting. And then, slowly, something changes. What was once liquid becomes solid. Butter forms. Soft at first. Then thicker. Then ready. This transformation feels almost magical in its simplicity. But it is not magic. It is time and motion working together. Butter becomes one of the most valued foods in the household. It spreads on bread. It enriches meals. It adds flavor to simple dishes. A small amount can change the entire feeling of a meal. Now let us step outside once more. The farm is alive with routine activity. Not hurried. Not chaotic. Just steady. Chickens scatter across the yard. A dog moves between buildings. Smoke rises gently from chimneys. The smell of breakfast may drift into the air. Each household follows its own rhythm. Yet all are connected by similar needs. Food must be prepared. Animals must be cared for. Water must be carried. Fire must be maintained. These tasks are constant. They do not end. They simply repeat. Now we move toward another important element of 19th century food life. Trade. Even in rural areas, not all food comes from the immediate surroundings. Some goods travel long distances. Sugar. Tea. Coffee. Spices. Salt. These items arrive through growing trade networks. They are carried by wagon, boat, and eventually rail. When they reach small towns and farms, they are treated with care. They are valuable not only because of taste, but because of distance. A spoonful of sugar may have traveled farther than a person ever will in their lifetime. This awareness gives certain foods a sense of rarity. Even if they appear regularly, they are still appreciated. Now let us return to a familiar place. The kitchen table. It is late afternoon. Light filters softly through windows. A simple snack may be served. Bread and butter. Tea. Leftover cornmeal cake. Dried fruit from last season. Nothing elaborate. But enough. Enough for energy. Enough for comfort. Enough to continue the day's work. Meals in the 19th century often serve this practical purpose. They are not always events. They are support. Fuel for life. As evening approaches, we move toward the final meal of the day. Supper. Supper carries a quieter tone than earlier meals. The day's work is done. The house is settling. Conversation is softer. Movements are slower. Perhaps a pot of stew rests on the table. Perhaps soup is shared among family members. Perhaps bread is passed from hand to hand. The food is simple. But the meaning is steady. Togetherness. Rest. Completion of another day. Now let us turn briefly to a seasonal change. Winter. Winter in 19th century America transforms food life in noticeable ways. Fresh food becomes limited. Storage becomes essential. Cellars and pantries take on greater importance. Meals rely more heavily on preserved goods. Dried beans. Stored potatoes. Salted meat. Pickled vegetables. Canned fruits. The flavors are different, but the structure remains. Food continues to sustain life. Even when the land is quiet beneath snow. Even when fields are still. Even when gardens sleep. The household continues its rhythm. Cooking. Eating. Preserving warmth. Sharing meals. Winter is not a pause in food life. It is another form of it. Now as night returns again, the kitchen grows dim. The fire reduces to glowing embers. The last dishes are washed. The table is cleared. And the house settles into silence. Somewhere outside, wind moves across frozen ground. Somewhere inside, stored food waits for tomorrow. And in this quiet balance between effort and rest, the 19th century food world continues its endless, gentle cycle. Day after day. Season after season. Meal after meal. Night settles once more, but it feels slightly deeper now, as if the land itself has learned the rhythm of silence. Across 19th century America, homes are dark except for the faintest traces of ember light. The air outside is colder in some regions, softer in others, depending on the season and the land. Somewhere, a river moves quietly under the moon. Somewhere, wind passes through empty fields that will soon hold another year's crops. Inside the house, everything rests. But food, in its own way, continues to exist even in rest. It exists in storage. In memory. In preparation for tomorrow. Let us gently return to one of the most important structures of the 19th century home. The cellar. A cool, quiet space beneath the house where time seems to slow down. The cellar is not bright. It is not decorated. It is not meant to be seen. It is meant to preserve. Here, rows of vegetables rest in wooden bins. Potatoes. Carrots. Turnips. Beets. Apples, carefully placed so they do not bruise. In some homes, barrels of pickles stand in corners. In others, jars of fruit line rough wooden shelves. The air is cool enough to slow decay. Not stop it. Just slow it. That small difference is everything. Because in the 19th century, slowing time is part of survival. Now let us imagine stepping down into this space. Each step creaks softly. The air becomes cooler. The light becomes thinner. And then, gradually, the stored food appears. Not as decoration, but as promise. A promise that winter will not be empty. That spring will eventually return. That meals will continue. Now we move upward again, back into the kitchen above. The fire has been tended through the night by habit or necessity. Even a small glow can be important. Morning will come soon, and the kitchen will need warmth again. This is how households think in this time. Not in isolated moments, but in continuous cycles. One meal leads to another. One day prepares for the next. Now let us return to something simple. Corn once again. Corn is everywhere in 19th century food life. But in winter, it becomes even more important. Because stored corn is reliable. Cornmeal stored in barrels becomes breakfast. Cornmeal becomes supper. Cornmeal becomes survival. Cornbread baked in cast iron pans fills the home with warmth. Its smell is familiar. Its taste is steady. It does not surprise. It comforts. Alongside corn, another winter staple appears frequently. Salt pork. Salt pork is not fancy food. It is preserved food. Meat that has been treated so it can last through long months. It is often used in small amounts. A piece added to beans. A piece added to soup. A piece added to stews. Its role is not abundance. Its role is flavor and nourishment stretched carefully across time. Now let us step outside into winter landscape. Snow may cover fields in northern regions. Frost may settle on rooftops. Smoke rises more visibly from chimneys against cold air. Movement slows, but life continues. People walk carefully. Animals are sheltered. Work still exists, but it changes shape. Less harvesting. More maintenance. More indoor labor. More reliance on stored food. Winter is the season that reveals the true importance of preparation. A full pantry is not just convenient. It is essential. Now we return to the kitchen again. A pot is simmering slowly. Perhaps beans. Perhaps soup. Perhaps leftover vegetables combined into a simple meal. The fire is steady. Not large. But enough. Steam rises gently. The smell fills the room. Even in cold weather, the kitchen remains the warmest place in the house. It is not just because of fire. It is because of activity. Because of food being made. Because of life continuing. Now let us think about another quiet but important food tradition. Tea and coffee rituals. In the 19th century, these drinks become deeply woven into daily life. Morning coffee. Afternoon tea. Evening gatherings. They are not just beverages. They are pauses in the day. Moments of warmth. Moments of conversation. A kettle on the stove becomes a signal. Something is about to be shared. Something simple, but meaningful. Sugar and milk are added when available. Sometimes plain. Sometimes rich. Always warm. Now we move to a different space. A small rural road in early winter evening. Wagons move slowly. Horses breathe visible clouds into cold air. A traveler passes a farmhouse. Inside, light glows warmly through the window. That light represents something deeper than illumination. It represents food being prepared. It represents shelter. It represents a meal waiting inside. Food is not only nourishment. It is reassurance. Now let us return to the home again. Supper is finished. Dishes are cleaned. The kitchen grows quiet. The fire reduces to embers. The family gathers in softer ways. Perhaps conversation continues. Perhaps silence settles in. Perhaps someone prepares for tomorrow's baking or cooking. Even rest is connected to food. Because tomorrow's food depends on tonight's preparation. Flour measured. Beans soaked. Firewood arranged. Water set aside. These small actions carry the next day forward. And so the cycle continues. Day after day. Meal after meal. Season after season. Now the house grows fully quiet. Outside, winter wind moves across fields that are resting. Inside, stored food rests as well. Both waiting. Both prepared. Both part of the same long rhythm that has shaped 19th century life from beginning to end. And in this stillness, the story of food continues not as action, but as endurance. A quiet promise that life will be fed again tomorrow. The night does not end the story. It only pauses it. In the quiet kitchens of 19th century America, the fire dims into soft ash, and the house settles into stillness once again. Outside, the wind moves across fields that have fed generations. Inside, the last traces of warmth linger in the air where food was prepared, shared, and remembered. Nothing truly disappears here. Meals leave behind memory. Work leaves behind readiness. Seasons leave behind rhythm. And in that rhythm, life continues in its simplest form. A hand will rise again to light the fire. Water will warm again over the stove. Bread will be baked again from flour stored in careful hands. Soup will simmer again in slow, patient pots. And people will gather again, as they always have, around food that is never just food but time, labor, land, and care made visible. The fields will wait. The kitchens will wait. And the next day will come, as gently as the last one ended. No grand ending. Only continuation. Only the quiet return of ordinary life. And then, stillness.